Hello, welcome to Shad Life. Well, I put these June Tech brakes on this bike. I wanted to try them out. They came off of that Poseidon Norton I got over a year ago. And honestly, I can't get these brakes to work for crap. Like, they just suck. So, I'm going to take them off. And the reason why I want to make a video about it is I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to do hydraulic brakes from scratch. So I have the brake line here. Most of the time I've done hydraulic brakes, I've had, they were already prepped with fluid and everything in them. And basically, I have some takeoffs that I have laying around, which are just the Shimano. I think people always ask me, I think this is a BLMT 501 lever, which is very similar shape and size as the like SLX and XT levers, so I like it. And then the brake is a BRMT 500. For those of you that know hydraulic brakes, might notice that this doesn't have that banjo or whatever. So this end also uses a olive and barb, just like this end. So yeah, and I'm gonna replace the front too, even though I could just throw this on, because it's a little kinked right here and so on. And yeah, I'm just gonna replace the brake line for the front also. And this frame has internal cable routing, which is the other reason why I need to replace the lines. I want to talk a little bit about BH90 and BH59 for a moment, because it is super confusing. So if this confuses you, I'll explain it as best as I can. So there are two brake lines for Shimano brakes that I know of, and it's BH90 and BH59. So here, these little gold parts, we call them the olive, right? They don't really matter that much. They're the same no matter what. What matters is the barb, is the little piece that gets pressed into the end of the brake line, right? So the outer diameter of the cable or brake line is the same between the two. What's different is the inner diameter. What's interesting is that you can't go by the number as to what's bigger and what's smaller. So it's funny because BH90 is actually a smaller inner diameter than BH59. And how you can tell the difference is gold versus silver. So if the barb is silver, it's BH90. If the barb is gold, it's BH59. And that's how you can tell the difference between the two. I don't think you could visually tell. Maybe you can. When I take the old ones off, maybe I'll cut the line and see if I can visually tell. But the fact that the original brake lines aren't marked at all, I can't tell which ones they are. So I did a bunch of research, and people say that BH90 is the newer system, the upgraded system. So if you have older brakes like those, if they're running BH59 cables, you can upgrade to BH90. And what it does is, because it's a smaller diameter, is it'll just give you more better brake pull. It might actually be one of those things, because if you think about Shimano brakes, right, they tend to be pretty responsive, like they lack modulation. So maybe the larger diameter gives you more modulation. But from what I've heard is it's more about the cable flex. Like, so you have fluid going on in there. This is coming apart on me now. You have fluid going on in there, and if the wall of the cable is thinner, when you pull the brake, the cable will actually, bulge out, might be the right term, might flex, and then it feels more squishy. When you have a thicker wall to the cable or the brake line, I keep calling it a cable because I'm used to traditional cables, but brake line, it's going to be a lot more firm, lot less of that squish. Almost a similar concept of going from compression housing on a traditional brake to compressionless, right? I kind of consider BH90 an upgrade, and more like upgrading to compressionless housing on a traditional brake. You can think of it that way if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing this, and like usual, my learning process of doing this from scratch like this will be interesting. And I kind of need a little, I got to find a little bucket or container because I have a feeling brake fluid's going to leak all over the place and I don't want it to get all over. So let me figure that out. Okay, so here I go. I'm going to just remove this from the caliper over this little container I have. I don't have any buckets or anything. Wow, that's really tight. So I'm gonna have to really crank on that. It's funny how tight some of these things can be, especially, there it goes, when they're made or when they come directly from the manufacturer. So I'm just gonna assume crap's gonna go everywhere because that's how this goes. And then I will know very shortly here what kind of, okay, it's, there we go. Okay. So there is the olive, and yes, it is a brass color. So that means this is a BH59. So I'm glad that I am upgrading to the BH90 in this case. So that's kind of cool. Because these are a little bit older brakes and they're like technically lower, below Dior, then I just assumed they would have the not as good a brake line. So, yep, I will be replacing this. So one of the things I need to do is kind of measure out how long I need it to be. Hydraulic brakes, they are a little bit more challenging to, like, you want to get it right the first time. And then once I get done measuring, I will go ahead and cut the new brake line and install it on here and everything. And I can do the front first because there's no internal routing, at least. I don't know. I should double check the fork because I have seen, oh no, it's external. It's right here. Here's the clamp. Yeah. I have seen some of these forks have the internal routing for the cable, but this one does not. So yeah, let me go ahead and remove the lever end, which is going to be an identical process, and we'll see. Okay, so I've mounted the caliper down there. Here's the brake line. I want to feed it through here and stick it into the lever. And yes, I put the lever where I want it, right? And then I can look at this and get an idea of, and then I want to route this through the mounting point on the fork and just step back and take a little bit of a look at it and see, is that the right length, right? I don't want it to be too long. Yeah, could I cut it just a tiny bit shorter? Maybe, but I think I'll be fine. I think I'll leave it. I might even, I don't know, maybe it could go, this is always a kind of a personal preference thing. How do you want your brake lines and all your cables to be, right? Do a little bit of this, see how they kind of interfere with each other and such, right? So yeah, I think I'll keep it this length, and whether I go under or over doesn't matter because I can always take the lever off and reweave it a different way if I don't like it. But for now, I'm going to just go underneath and go ahead and mount that in. with the new barb and new olive, and then I'll have to go through the whole bleed process. One thing I noticed, and I'll show you here, is see the black little bits of fluid in there? That means I probably needed to change the fluid on these brakes anyway, so that'll be happening. Okay, so this is now all installed, right? One thing that I didn't mention, but I want to mention now, is make sure you put this thing on your brake line first, and you put your little thread piece or whatever. I don't even know what this is going to be called, like a compression nut maybe, but that needs to be on the brake line, as is this piece, because if you forget to put this on, you can't put it on after the fact. So you got to put it on, make sure it's the correct direction, all of that. Sometimes it's a good idea to, before you tighten anything or put anything together, is kind of fit things, make sure everything's right, and then go ahead and slide this down, right? And then do that, put this on the correct way. Then you can put your olive on after you've pressed the barb in and all that. So there is a certain order of doing this that's important. Now this is all set to, you know, there is no fluid in there. See how the brake pads aren't even moving? Nothing's happening, right? So I need to go and add fluid and pump fluid through the system and all of that. And then, you know, that'll bleed out because I'm sure there's still some fluid here and maybe a little bit left in the lever too. And so we'll go ahead and do that process. Okay, I'm not going to go super into detail on how I bleed the brakes and all of that. I'm just going to go on this initial setup because there is no fluid in the line. So I have the bleed block in the brake. That's another reason why you want to take the pads out so you can wedge that in there. I have, for Shimano, you use the syringe deal down here, and of course that fell off, and then you use this little cup with fluid. SRAM, you use like this 2 syringe method, so I'm sure you could use either or method for either or brake, but what I want to do here is I want to pull from here because I have everything open and try to pull fluid through the system. And oh boy, that's gross looking. And so the idea is this is all getting pulled through the system. You can see kind of how dark and gross that is, which is actually why now the fluid is clean. So I'm going to stop right there, right? Because it's clear and clean. And then I'm going to go ahead and close this valve while making sure that stays on. Remove this and then get rid of this gross looking fluid. If you see what it looks like in the bottle, this is mineral oil now, Shimano, versus what it looks like in there. And this is mixed with some of the newer stuff, so it's initially it was a much darker color. So this is bad fluid. We want to get rid of it, and we want all nice and clean fluid. So now the system is kind of what I considered loaded, right? So there's going to be fluid through the brake line, fluid filling in here, fluid filling in the lever, but we need to get rid of the air bubbles. And this is the part where I'm not going to go super into detail because I've done this. Now we're in the standard brake bleeding process, right? And so I'm going to work to get all the air bubbles out of here. I can even start doing it now and see that the brake is actually working, and yeah, there's little bubbles that pop up. So this is where I do the whole standard brake bleeding system. The other thing I want to do, since I'm talking about it, is I want to remove this little rubber cap. I want to squeeze and hold the lever and just check my mounting points, right, where I put the brake line in there and make sure that it's not leaking. I think I need to tighten that a little more, but the valve needs to be tightened a tiny bit more here. Okay, but I want to make sure when I squeeze that this fitting is also holding, because if it's not, I need to tighten it more, or if I tighten it more and it still leaks, something else is wrong, right? But I can tell you right now, this brake is already like feeling pretty much fully loaded. All I'm going to do is get air out of the system at this point, and that's where, you know, looking up a video on brake bleeding and all of that comes in handy. I recommend Park Tool being the one to look up and so on. But this is, at this point, a successful install. I don't have any leaking going on, anything like that. So it's good. Just gonna get the air out of the system, put everything back together, and I will now have a new front brake on this bike. There we go. I have the front brake working and it feels good. It's got the right feel, pull to it. And I can tell you right now, these are already working better because those June Tech brakes were so bad that if I squeezed the lever, I could turn the wheel with my hand. And this, super solid grab. There's nothing. So I mean, once I get on the bike, I'll be able to know even more how well they work, but they already work better than the June Tech brakes. So awesome. That was the first time I've ever done this with putting a new brake line in, and it wasn't that bad. Granted, I have experience doing all the bleeding and working with disc brakes. I just have never completely replaced with a new brake line. But really that process of replacing the brake line is pretty simple. And with these particular brakes, it's like the same process for each end. There are brakes that have the banjo and different things. So you need to make sure you get the right brake line kit for the model brake. Couple of things to take note. This is Shimano, so mineral oil. So you need to have mineral oil. The Shimano bleed process is a little different than SRAM. I do have some SRAM brakes, so I have all the stuff for the SRAM bleed process. And I have some of the TRP Evo brakes. They're also mineral oil. I haven't really looked up what the bleed process is, but I generally just kind of use the Shimano style bleed process. I like it. It seems a little simpler. The two syringe thing gets a little hard to work with, where this, I feel like you're using gravity and things like that. But it feels really good. Like this is awesome. Super stoked on it. So now I got to do the back. I'm not going to video that part, but basically the only difference is exact same process, but since this is internal cable routing, which is really the main reason why I thought, well, I'm just going to get new brake line and learn how to do it and everything. The internal cable routing is, you know, making sure I feed the cable through, and on this particular bike, it's just this short stretch of the top tube from here to here. That's internal. It's not internal in the seat stay or anything like that. So it should be pretty easy to do. I mean, I got this brake line through there, or brake cable in this case, because these June Techs use regular wire cable. But yeah, super stoked on this. It'll be nice to have working brakes on my fat bike. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.